Starting in verse 25, Peter's denial part 2, which actually includes 2 denials. We're going to make it as far as verse 27, because there's some stuff that John doesn't include, but we're going to jump over so we get the whole picture. Starting in verse 25, and Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. They said therefore unto him, Art not thou also one of his disciples? He denied it and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off, saith, Did not I see thee in the garden with him? Peter then denied again, and immediately the cock crew. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, as we continue to work our way through these trials and denials, we realize that it often doesn't get any easier to stand up and do what is right. It just needs to be an act of faith. Every time we have an opportunity to share your word, every time we have an opportunity to be accounted as a soldier of the Lord, we need to make sure that we take every opportunity, never knowing when we will get another one. And help us realize that in the worst of situations, we can remain calm, knowing that you are in control of all things. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We saw the trial part 1, Peter's denial part 1, his trial part 2, and now we're going to look at the denial part 2. He is warming himself by the fire. Matthew 26 and verse 71 calls it a porch. It's a courtyard adjacent to the hall. And so we're going to see a progression. One of the guys I was reading about this week had said Peter's denial is very similar to what we see in Psalm 1, where you have a standing and then sitting, a progression. You know, you are among the people, and then you're sitting with them, and then next thing you know, you're comfortable by the fire. And that's kind of what's happening here. Now, Peter was in that outer courtyard, and the servant girl wouldn't let him in until John goes out. We believe it's John, goes out and escorts him into the hallway, and she asks, expecting a negative response. Obviously, she just assuming that because John was the one who came out and got him, are you also one of the disciples, kind of a thing? It would make sense. You know, oftentimes you're known by the company that you keep. But you would ascend up into that gate, into this outer courtyard. And the other guests and the servants are warming themselves by this lower patio. And so in one place, I think it's Luke's account, it's called under. In other words, you're out here by the street, and then you've come into this outer courtyard, and now you're on the patio, and then you would ascend up into the hall where all of this is transpiring. But the important part here is to realize that Peter is the closest he could get to Jesus Christ, but he's also in the midst of the arresting party. That's where we left him last week. And if you look at this situation, and jump over to Matthew chapter 26. There are a lot of details that are different between Matthew, Mark, and Luke, or what we call the synoptic gospels, and John. Because John assumes that you've already known the details from the other three, and so he doesn't include them again. But in Matthew chapter 26 and verse 71, we see a different aspect. And when he was gone out into the porch, another maid saw him and said unto him that was there, This fellow was also with Jesus of Nazareth. Now, what's interesting here is you have a second girl who comes through and says, pretty sure I've seen this guy with Jesus of Nazareth. So if you think that the situation's going to get better and better as you go on, Peter's an example that it's not. And because the first girl asks, expecting a negative answer, I don't know why John's coming out here to let you into the outer courtroom, but are you one of his? And it was really easy to answer no. But this girl comes and says she recognizes him. All right? Mark chapter 14, verse 69, same thing. And what's interesting here is she makes a statement that kind of starts a conversation. We see in this verse, she is starting this. Another maid saw him and said unto them that were there. Okay? Is she confronting Peter? No. She's simply saying to the other folks that are there, this fellow was also with Jesus of Nazareth. Now, Matthew says, and again he denied with an oath, I do not know the man. Jump over to Mark chapter 14 and look at verse 69. Putting all the details together here so you can see kind of what's happening, and you can tell the angst and the stress that's going to be building here in Peter. In Mark chapter 14 and verse 69, it says, And a maid saw him again and began to say to them that stood by, This is one of them. And he denied it again. Now, you look at Luke 22, there is a they that are insinuating here that several of them joined the conversation. Okay? The girl says to the folks that are sitting around the fire, this guy was one of them. And then they start asking Peter. That's what John's telling us. They are going to say to him, well, where does the they come from? Well, the servant girl walks in. Don't know if she's carrying food or drink to him or what she's doing, but she recognizes Peter and just says to the crowd, he's one of them too. Which again, isn't, it's not like they're going to jump up, grab out their swords and start hacking and whacking, because who's even closer to Jesus than Peter is? John is. And John went and got him and brought him in there, so it's not like his life is in danger, but he doesn't want really to be recognized and become a part of the conversation. So he's going to deny it. There's an opportunity that I see here that he misses. You have several people who are starting the conversation as this girl has recognized him, and this isn't just a casual comment. This is, oh, I know who you are. You're one of them. And the opportunity that I see is that Peter could have just made it right here, right? He could have been standing out here by the fire and proudly proclaimed his allegiance to Jesus Christ and made the whole thing right. If there's a time, now's the time. He hasn't been accused of anything. He's not in danger of anything. It's not a crime to be a disciple of Jesus yet. But he denies again. Not to the girl that said anything, but the insinuation here, especially from Luke chapter 22, is that he's talking to the men at the fire. And he says in Luke 22:58, with an oath. Okay? Now, a lot of times when we think of an oath, especially in the next verse, and for a long time I thought about this, and I decided I was going to study these words out. We think of cursing, right? That is not what's happening here. He is at the high priest's house. He is among a bunch of temple guard. And so what he is doing here is he is saying, well, I swear by, or I swear on, or I swear an oath before God that. Okay? It's almost the same principle as when we're in court and we put our hand on the Bible and raise our right hand and say, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. What he is doing is he is swearing an oath here. It's going to get a little bit more vehement because now suspicion starts to abound. Go to Luke chapter 22 and look at verse 59. Because Luke is going to give us a little bit of a time lapse that John does not. Up until now, John is just telling us the important things that happened. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And there's not really any significant clock counting that kind of tells us what's going on. But in Luke chapter 22 and verse 59, we have a reference that's going on here that tells us that Jesus was in front of Caiaphas for quite a while. And we see that because in verse 59 it says, "And about the space of 1 hour after, another confidently affirmed, saying, Of a truth, this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean." All right, now notice a couple of things. Some time has gone by. What kind of a conversation do you think has been going on around the fire after this maid walks in and tells everybody, "Oh yeah, I believe he was one of them," and then she's off doing whatever her maidly duties were? And it begins a conversation, and Peter vehemently denies and takes an oath, "I'm telling you the truth, guys, I am not." And that is the second denial. But an hour is going to go by, and if I'm sitting around the fire with this guy, I'm probably looking over that way every once in a while and trying to figure out if I recognize this guy or not. And sure enough, this suspicion begins to abound here with Peter. And because you have an hour later, and you have someone who is going to tell them not, "Oh, you're not one of those either," or "I recognize you." The language here is very important. Of a truth. Listen, you want to take an oath that you're telling the truth. I'll take an oath that I'm telling the truth. That's what the third person says. Of a truth, this fellow also was with him, for he is a Galilean. Now, what's interesting about this whole situation here is you have time that has elapsed with people able to talk. You have a ramping up of the questioning that's going on, and now you have somebody who is pretty certain it's not what he said. He said, "I'd put my hand on the Bible and raise my right hand and swear that this guy's one of them." I mean, it's not, a maid just casually coming through and dropping a comment to the crowd. This is an individual who is sure of what is happening. And he's going to provide a little bit of evidence because he says, "Well, you've got these other folks here, and these other folks all know that you are a Galilean, and so your speech betrays you." But what happens is one of Malchus, you remember him, right? In a space of no time at all, he has an ear, doesn't have an ear, has an ear again. And nobody can tell the difference. I mean, if you aren't standing in the garden, what do you tell people? "Man, I went out last night to arrest this guy, and one of his men pulled a sword out and whacked my ear off." And people be looking at you going, "Which ear?" Because it looks like you got two. And then they'd be looking for stitches or a bandage or, what did you do back in those days to try and put an ear back on? But everybody else that was there, you have 200 Roman witnesses, plus you have all the temple guard who know exactly what happened. Because there was no time at all. Here's Malchus, and he's just standing there watching and participating, and he tries to duck, gone with an ear. Jesus touches his ear and heals his ear again. And you can't tell that all of this has transpired. Do you not think that you would remember what was going on that night if somebody whacked your ear off and then somebody put your ear back on and you didn't even know your ear was whacked off? And Peter is finding himself in a pretty tough situation here because Malchus' relative, I'm trying to figure out if it's Matthew 26 that happens. Let's go back to, I believe it is, Matthew chapter 26. Tells us that it was a relative of Malchus. No, it just says another man, so it has to be Mark. Malchus' relative was in the garden with Malchus. All right? Now, think about this. Because this witness is personally vested. His family was affected. Boy, if somebody hacked off your brother's ear or your cousin's ear and you were standing right there, you'd take notice of it, wouldn't you? I mean, his family has been affected by this. He is personally vested in this. But he's also personally involved because he says, I was in the garden. I am an eyewitness. I was there. And then Luke 22, verse 59 says he was personally convinced. Confidently affirmed it. He didn't go up and go, are you one of those guys? Or I think you are one of those guys. He says, of a truth, I would swear to it that you were there. And your speech tells me that you're a Galilean. They have been talking and getting to know each other around the fire, and we know that a space of an hour has gone down between the second denial and what's about to be the third denial, and they've heard people talking, and now you've got all of these folks who have heard Peter, and they're going, yeah, you do sound like you're from Galilee, where Jesus was from. The third denial, a casual question of association by a girl for the first denial. The second denial is a kind of a concerning link because you have multiple people asking now once she sparks the interest. But the third denial is a confident identification with evidence. I was there, your speech betrays you, and I remember what happened to Malchus. He's a family member of mine. Now you have to remember by this time, it's not illegal to be a disciple. But you know what it is illegal to do? Hack off an ear with a sword. It's a violent act, right? And if you have a member of Malchus' family standing there going, I was in the garden and I saw you, the reason you stand out from the garden from everybody else is probably because you were the dude that hacked off the ear. I remember you now. Matthew 26, verses 73 and 74. And Mark 14, 70, 72 both say, then began he to curse and to swear, saying, I know not the man. A curse and to swear is a binding statement of telling the truth. In Acts chapter 23, verses 12, 14, and 21, we have a situation where they know that Paul is headed to Jerusalem. And so you have a bunch of devout disciples of the Pharisees who hear that he is headed to Jerusalem, and they bind themselves with an oath that they will not eat or drink until they have arrested Paul. That is the exact same word and the exact same language that we have here. Now, I don't know if history tells me those fellers starved to death because they didn't get to kill Paul. Romans came in, swept him away, sent him on to Caesar. I guess they sat around. No, they probably broke their vow. But it was a strong vow because it keeps getting repeated. When they hear of it, they go to the Romans and they say, listen, these guys took an oath that they're not going to eat or drink until they can get Paul. And the Romans take it seriously. Why? Because that's how serious the oath was. It was a big deal to break an oath that you swore in that fashion. And so while the pressure is getting ramped up on poor Peter here, this is the extent to which he is willing to go. You have a very vehement denial with the strongest assurance. You know the games you used to play when you were a kid, right? I swear on my mother's grave. Nobody would ever tell a lie swearing on their mother's grave, right? Except somehow, fingers crossed, made that all go away. And then, you get really into it and you'd say, you pinky promise? Pinky promise, kiss the finger? Woo. Talk about getting serious. But then, if people still weren't in and they thought that you were messing with them, you could pull out stick a needle in my eye. I don't remember the whole thing. I didn't get into that kind of stuff, but I had friends that did. Cross my heart, hope to die. Stick a needle in my eye. Don't be sticking no needle in my eye. Right? Oh, he's got to be serious now. Because if not, we get to stick a needle in. Do you ever know anybody that lied and got a needle stuck in their eye? Well, it's a kid's game, and that's how we, try to reassure somebody that we're telling the truth because our yes can't be yes and our no can't be no. That's exactly what's happening with Peter here. He's basically standing here by the fire and saying, I swear on my mother's grave, I'll pinky promise you, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye, I do not know the man. And everybody around that fire is going, ooh. I mean, it was one thing when the other guys started questioning him, but then here comes Malchus, his relative, an hour later, and he's got the facts. He's got the stats to back it up, right? Oh yeah, I recognize you, you earwhacker. And Peter's kind of fighting for his life here. But look at what he says. I know not this man of whom ye speak. I know not this man of whom ye speak. Now I'm just going to say, there is a big difference between saying, I am not a disciple in the garden, and saying, I don't even know who you're talking about. Because if I'm warming myself by the fire and it's been a while and people have been coming by and accusing, I'd be sitting there thinking, then why are you here? You are not one of the temple guard. You're not one of the servants here. The only reason for you to be here is either you're John inside or you're one of his disciples that didn't get that far inside. I have no clue about who you are talking about. Why would I be with him if I don't even know who he is the insinuation that Peter is making here. Back in our passage in verse 27, there is an awful realization that happens. But I want you to go to Luke chapter 22 because there is more detail in Luke than what John gives us in verse 27. Immediately the rooster crows for the second time. Now the rooster has crowed one time before, after a denial. And I believe that is God's mercy in trying to shake Peter and wake him up and make him think about the words that he had said before. But in Luke 22 and verse 61, we get a little bit more detail. And the Lord turned and looked upon Peter. So at this point, he is close enough to the hall that Jesus can look right out the doors and see him. That's how close they are. He's trying to listen to what's happening inside and see what's going down. And it says, and the Lord turned and looked upon Peter, and Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said unto him, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. You put a couple of things together here. Jesus looks at Peter, and then Peter remembers. Every time I read this when I was a youngster, I thought, boy, when he heard that cock crow the second time, that rooster going off, it triggered something and he remembered. That's not what made him remember. What made him remember is he's trying to figure out what's going on with Jesus in there, and he just denied ever knowing anything about him, and Jesus turned and looked at him. And I just have to imagine that until Peter and Jesus are having a conversation on the seashore after he has arisen, Peter is probably never the same. What's the last thing you say to somebody or about somebody before they pass away? And Peter, if you remember, he's the one, oh, no, you don't need to go down there and die over my dead body. And Jesus is saying, get thee behind me, Satan. And then he warns him, you're going to deny me not one time, but 3 times before the cock crows twice. So that's 3 opportunities to make it right. You have a merciful warning in there the first time the rooster crows. But the second time the rooster crows, you realize what a miserable failure you've been. I wish we could just fast forward real quickly to after the resurrection and look at the conversation that happens among Jesus and Peter when Peter's fishing and the boat's about to go down from the fish and he dives in and swims to shore. Because Jesus is going to tell him, dude, are you listening carefully to me? Because I have a job for you to do. Do you love me unconditionally, Peter? And he doesn't lie, and he doesn't sugarcoat. You know all things, Lord. You know I phileo you. You know exactly where my love is, Lord. Well, if you at least phileo me, then feed my sheep. Identify with me. Peter, sell out for me. Peter, go all in. Peter. The last time we were this close, it didn't go so well. He has bound himself that he does not know the man. And then the rooster crows. What's Peter's response? He went out and he wept bitterly. I would imagine Peter couldn't find it in him to be at the foot of the cross like John was. All the rest of the disciples have scattered. Peter's one of those go-getters, he's vivacious personality and flamboyant personality and wide open, and if he can see an avenue, he just floors the gas and goes for it, because that's the way he is. I see Peter so crushed that he can't appear at the foot of the cross. But there's something that we need to know here, because John does not include many of the details at the trial before Caiaphas. So go to Matthew chapter 26. Because in John's account, we're getting ready to appear before Pilate. They're going to take him on for his civil trial. But there is much more that happens that John doesn't share with everyone. In Matthew chapter 26, beginning in verse 59, we have more detail about what is happening in Caiaphas' hall. Now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought false witness against Jesus to put him to death. We're not going to cover everything here. We don't have the time. But I just want to leave a few things for you to think about. The chief priests, the elders, and all the council are there. It is illegal that this proceeding be held in Caiaphas' house. It should have been held in the hall of the Sanhedrin, which was public for people to watch. It's also illegal to do a trial where a man's life is on the line in private. Okay? It's also illegal to be at night. Any legal proceeding was to take place after the morning sacrifice. That was instituted a long time ago, and you want to do some old research digging, you can dig up the books of the Sanhedrin, and it's like book 4, 5, and 6 cover a lot of these rules. In that book, the whole purpose for it was nothing happened in the Jewish legal system until the morning sacrifice took place at the temple. The thought being, it was imperative that a person be right before God before he could have any hope of giving any justice in the legal system. And you could arrest a person, and you could hold them, but you weren't supposed to interview them, you weren't supposed to call witnesses, you weren't supposed to do anything until after the morning sacrifice happened at the temple. But it was also illegal to hold court during a holiday. If there was a festival going on, again, you could arrest somebody and you could hold them, but you couldn't try them until after the festival, because they wanted to make sure everybody was paying attention to what was happening at the trial and not distracted by what's happening at the holiday or the festival. But notice the language that's used here in Matthew, because it's important. It says, the chief priests and the elders and all the council. In other words, nobody disagreed with what was happening. Very next phrase, what's it say? sought false witness against Jesus to put him to death. Okay, this is a capital punishment trial. Capital punishment trial has to follow very strict rules and regulations according to the Sanhedrin. But it says they sought. A trial usually starts when a witness accuses the person. You don't have to go and find witnesses after the person is arrested. So you are made aware that a crime has been committed, you go and arrest the individual, and then these folks bring their charges, and then the trial begins, where you try to figure out if they're telling the truth, and what kind of evidence they have, and if the different witnesses can agree. And how this happens is, you don't bring all the witnesses in at the same time, you interview them one by one. Very carefully, asking detailed questions, and then you dismiss that witness, and then you bring this witness in, and you do the same thing. And in order for the person to be guilty of murder, those witnesses have to agree in detail about what happened with individual looking into. That is not what we see happening here. It's interesting because they can't find any evidence. They found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet they found none. In other words, they couldn't get at least two of them to agree on what they said. At the last came two false witnesses. Now here's another problem, because no one has spoke on behalf of the defendant. There's supposed to be someone who is supposed to speak on behalf of the defendant. When they were at Annas' house, they tried to get Jesus to do that for himself, self-incriminate him. They send him on to Caiaphas, and Caiaphas is going to ask him about his doctrine and his disciples. But there's no person from the Sanhedrin that stands up for him and agrees to be his defense attorney, if you will. So they find these last two, and these guys agree. And what they agree on is, I heard this fellow say, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. And the high priest arose and said unto him, now, this isn't the high priest's job. High priest is kind of like the vice president in our situation. He sits there and watches what's going on, and then he makes sure that things are handled the way they're supposed to be. The high priest arose and said unto him, answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witness against thee? You have these two folks, and now notice, in the Jewish law, that's the minimum number that there can be. To establish something, there's supposed to be 2 or 3 witnesses. And so these two are going to say, well, I heard him say that he could destroy the temple and raise it up. And Jesus does not answer. Why? Because he doesn't have to. He wasn't asked a question, and it's been done illegally, so he doesn't have to answer. There's no authority here. There's nothing for him to respond to. And so the high priest is going to intervene and try and back him into a corner. Now, we know from John, right? John's always saying Jesus is in control, and he is in control. High priest rose and said unto him, answerest thou nothing? What is it that these witnesses witness against thee? Jesus held his peace. And the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure thee by the living God that thou tell us whether thou be the Christ, the Son of God. So what he's going to do here is he's going to ask him to swear an oath before the one true living God. As if Jesus wasn't always aware of what he said before the one true living God. And you don't have to ask him to swear an oath to tell the truth. How many times has he stood in the temple and said, I am the way, Come on, guys, I don't just tell the truth. I am the truth. You want to know who I claim to be? Why didn't you arrest me when I said I am? How many times throughout the book? Why didn't you arrest me and put me on trial when I claimed to be about my Father's business on the Sabbath day? right? There should be no question in anybody's mind who he is or what he claims, but now they want to get it on record, if you will. And so they are asking him two questions. The first one, are you the Christ? Are you the Messiah? They asked John the Baptist this way back at the beginning of the book, right? Got to be some authority going on here for why you're doing what you're doing. By what authority? Are you the Messiah? And the second question is, are you divine, equal to God? Now you'll notice that Jesus is going to respond to him in verse 64. Jesus saith unto him, thou hast said. And if you were interpreting this and you wanted to provide clarity in italics, you would add the truth. In other words, Jesus has said to him, thou hast said the truth, or it is as you said. That is his answer to them. But he's going to take it a little bit farther, because over and over and over again throughout the book of John, they keep asking for a sign, right? And he said, it is as you have said, nevertheless. That word in English, furthermore, or in addition to. Let me tell you this. Hereafter ye shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. You will see me sit at the right hand of the almighty power that you just asked me to swear by. And at his right hand is a place of honor, dignity, and power. Not only are you asking me to swear by him, I'm telling you I share that authority. It's a clear, distinct claim to deity. And, fellas, you want a sign? There's going to be a time where you will see me come in the clouds for judgment. We call that his second coming, not his first coming. Look at the response. Boy, are they mad. They are mad. Then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, he has spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Listen, you can only claim it's blasphemy if it's false. Right? You're not guilty of blasphemy if you speak the truth. It's only blasphemy if it isn't true. But it's illegal to have a preconceived opinion of the outcome of the trial. He has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need witnesses? Well, maybe you need witnesses, fellas, to see whether or not it's blasphemous or not. The verdict, guilty of death, which is illegal because of capital punishment. The sentence is given on the following day, so everybody has a chance to think about the evidence that was provided at the day before, and they have a chance to calm down and look at it more objectively, so they would come back the next day and sentence them. But he's already sentenced him. Now look at verse 67. Then did they spit in his face and buffeted him, and others smote him with the palm of their hands. Buffeted means to hit with the fist. They punched him. Literally means to rap him with the fist. So you have some people who are spitting on him, dishonoring. You have some people punching him, and you have some people slapping him with an open-handed fist. And then in verse 68, they're going to joke about it. In Luke chapter 22, verses 63 through 71 says they blindfolded him while they did this. And they smacked him and punched him, and they said, prophesy unto us, thou Christ, who is it that smote thee? They are mocking him while they are abusing him. Verse 65 of Luke 22 says they hurled blasphemous remarks at him. Listen, you claim to be the Son of God. We're going to call you all these blasphemous things because God wouldn't just sit there and take it, would he? Wouldn't God do something if you sat there and uttered all these things about him that are blasphemous? And then they ask him in Luke 22, verse 67, for self-incrimination. Are you the Messiah? Let's turn there real quickly as we close. We got to turn there because there's a part I want you to see that shows Jesus knows exactly what's going on and he is committed to it. Luke chapter 22, look at verse 65. Many other things blasphemously spake they against him. And as soon as it was day, okay, now they're going to try and do things legally. Wait for daylight and let's have. The elders of the people and the chief priests and the scribes came together and led him into their council. Okay, now they're going to do things legally. Let's go to the council and let's gather everybody together. Art thou the Christ? Tell us. Look at Jesus' response. He said unto them, if I tell you, ye will not believe. And if I also ask you, you will not answer me, nor let me go. His reply to them is, you won't believe. You already know that I've claimed to be the Messiah. You already know that I've claimed to be the Son of God. You already know multiple claims to deity. You've heard me say, I am the I am. You're not going to believe me now if I say it one more time. In verse 68, you will not answer me. In other words, you're not going to give me proof that I am not the Christ, because you said we don't need any more witnesses. And you're not going to let me go because you've already decided my fate. And in verse 70, they said, are you then the Son of God? And he said unto them, you are telling the truth. Calm, controlled Jesus Christ. Making fun of him. Can you imagine? The Son of God, and they're sitting there spitting on you and slapping you and punching you and making a mockery, and why don't you prophesy? You don't think he doesn't know who's hitting him? And they're going to ask him again, as if it makes a difference to ask him again when he is so publicly. That's one of the things that John does so well. Over and over and over again. Jesus is the Son of God, come in the flesh. Believe on him, gang. Believe on him. It's so obvious who he is. And yet you have these folks standing here doing this facade of a trial. Why? Because Jesus Christ had already bound himself to it. It must happen. It is the fullness of time. It's time to go to the cross and do what I came to do. And it doesn't matter how unjust human society is. It doesn't matter how unjust human people are. Because then you're going to go to Rome, and then you're going to go to popular opinion, and the outcome of all three of them doesn't matter. Jesus has bound himself to the cross. That's where he's going for you and I. The rest of it is just to let us know, man to man, how wrong it was. Let's bow for a word of prayer.